If you haven't been on an expedition, you might be forgiven for thinking only of beautiful scenery and tranquil natural settings. Well, that's certainly an important aspect of an expedition, but it isn't the whole story. An expedition takes people out of their everyday lives and puts them in a completely new environment. Learning to cope in this new environment requires different skills and greater responsibilities. And when you add the fact that an expedition is physically and mentally draining, you have a situation that requires extra care to maintain safety. This program will introduce 3 key skills that are crucial for a safe, successful and enjoyable expedition: navigation, first aid and reading the weather. Of course, you won't become an expert in these skills just by watching this program, but we can illustrate some basic concepts. Your group leader has ultimate responsibility on an expedition. They'll be qualified in navigation and first aid and have experience at reading the weather. But your group leader can't be everywhere at once, so it's important to avoid relying too heavily on them. When everybody is making a contribution, an expedition will be a lot safer. And besides, an expedition is more fun when you understand what's going on. One of the obvious challenges when in a natural environment is finding your way around. Not only is it an unfamiliar environment, but where are the street signs and street directories to guide you? Well, in many natural environments, we have tracks, signs and markers to help us navigate. And of course, we use maps. Maps are especially useful when your route is not clearly marked, but you should carry and consult maps on any expedition. Not only do they protect you against mistakes, but they make the experience a lot more enjoyable. What would you rather do? Blindly follow the person in front of you, or be actively engaged with your surroundings? In its simplest form, navigation is really just about being aware of your relationship with your environment. Before you go on any expedition, you should familiarize yourself with the route. And the only way to do this is by using maps. There are a variety of maps, but for the purposes of practical navigation, we use topographic maps because they can show the elevation and the shape of the land through the use of contour lines and shading. Topographic maps commonly range in scale from 1 to 250,000 to 1 to 10,000. But the maps you will usually need for expeditions will be either 1 to 50,000 or 1 to 25,000. What this means is that every 1 centimetre on a 1 to 50,000 map equates to 500 metres, and on a 1 to 25,000 map equates to 250 metres. If you want to measure distance on a map, you use the scale. If you want to find the straight line distance, you simply measure the distance between the 2 points and put this against the scale. But what if you want to measure the distance between 2 objects along a windy track? It's simple, really. Just take a piece of string and lay it along the track, marking the start and end point with your fingers. Then pull the string tight and place it against the scale. This will give you the total distance. But this isn't the end of the matter, because you haven't yet taken the shape of the land into account. Most topographic maps use contours and sometimes shading to show the elevation and shape of the land. The idea of a contour is very simple. It's an imaginary line drawn on a map joining all places of equal height above a fixed datum line, usually sea level. So anywhere you stand on this contour is the same height above sea level. And the distance between each contour line represents a fixed number. So lines that are close together indicate a steep descent or ascent, and lines that are further apart indicate flatter land. So in theory, by using just a map, you can accurately picture the landscape and estimate the time you'll need to travel between points. In reality, this skill takes time and experience to develop properly, but you have to start somewhere. As a rough guide, allow 1 hour for every 3 to 4 kilometres on a smooth track or 1 to 2 kilometres in rough terrain, and add an additional hour for every 500 metre ascent and 1,000 metre descent. Of course, there are other factors to consider when estimating time, such as rest stops, the weight of your pack, and the weather. So how do you navigate when you have a map but no clearly defined paths or tracks? Well, you need to use other navigation aids. There are a number of possibilities. Natural aids like the sun, stars and moon, or technological devices like global positioning systems and altimeters. But the most common navigation aid we use is the compass. Some general points about compasses are: don't use them near iron or steel objects, electrical equipment, power lines and motor cars. Be aware that iron ore deposits can affect a compass. And don't use a compass designed for the southern hemisphere in the northern hemisphere and vice versa. There are many different types of compass, but we'll focus on the most common, the silver style compass. They comprise of a compass housing on a base plate which serves as the protractor. Some other important features of this compass are the direction of travel arrow, the orienting lines and arrow, the magnetic needle, the graduated rotating dial, and the lubber line. Most maps are printed so that north is approximately at the top of the map, with grid lines running south-north and west-east. However, there may be a discrepancy between north on a map and north on a compass. This is called magnetic declination. A compass will point to magnetic north, which is different from the North Pole, and in fact differs from year to year. The extent of the difference between magnetic north and grid north depends on where you are in the world. Some maps include magnetic north lines, which makes your job easier. But even if your map doesn't have these lines, somewhere on the map it will show the magnetic declination for that region. This will allow you to make the necessary adjustments. We'll now demonstrate the 1, 2, 3 method for using a silver style compass. Before you begin, you need to be very sure of your start point, because if you make a mistake here, all your subsequent calculations will be incorrect. The first step is to place the side of the compass against the map so that it connects your start point with your first destination point. And make sure the direction of travel arrow is facing in the direction you want to travel. If you wanted to go the other way, you'd need to reverse the compass. The second step is to turn the compass housing so that the orienting lines are parallel to the south-north lines on the map and the orienting arrow points north. Now read the grid bearing where the lubber line intersects the graduated rotating dial. You need to add or subtract the magnetic declination indicated on the map by rotating the dial. The third and final step is to hold the compass in front of you and turn it until the red end of the magnetic needle is directly over the orienting arrow. The direction of travel arrow will now point precisely to your destination point. This process can be repeated until you reach your ultimate destination. There are some other navigation techniques worth mentioning. An attack point is a feature near your objective that is easier to find. Your destination may be a small clearing in a forest, but nearby is a dam on a creek. You would navigate to the dam and then the clearing would be much easier to find. A handrail is a definite linear feature that's roughly aligned with your intended course. For example, you might find a fire break to walk along that can lead you to your destination. Aiming off is a technique used to find an object on a definite continuous line, such as a mountain ridge, river, or coastline. For example, you may need to find a point on a road. If you aim directly for the point and miss slightly when you arrive at the road, you might not know whether to turn right or left to find the point. But if you deliberately aim to the left of the point, you'll know to turn right when you reach the road. The main point about navigation is to take the time to notice what's going on around you. This is especially true if you're lost. Don't panic. Just rest for a moment. Then see if you can locate your position using your map and the surrounding landscape. One final but important point about navigation is to make sure that a responsible person who is not travelling with you has all the details of your expedition. This should include the names of all the members, your intended route, and the time you expect to return. Now let's summarise what we've covered. Use tracks, signs and markers. Always carry maps. Measuring distance on a topographic map. Contours. Estimating travel time. Navigation aids. General points about compasses. The silver style compass. Grid lines on a topographic map. Magnetic declination. The 1, 2, 3 method. Attack points. Handrails. Aiming off. And leaving details of your expedition with a responsible person. Not only do we put ourselves in a completely different environment on an expedition, but we also distance ourselves from the support structures we have in our everyday lives, like medical assistance. So you should take careful note of the phrase, "Prevention is the best medicine," and do as much as possible to avoid injuring yourself while on an expedition. However, not even the most meticulous preparation can prevent all injuries, so it's worth knowing some basic information about first aid. Your expedition leader will be fully qualified in first aid and will carry a comprehensive first aid kit. They're ultimately responsible for all first aid on an expedition. But it's important that you too carry a small first aid kit and have some knowledge of how to treat minor injuries. This lessens the burden on the expedition leader and allows you to take more responsibility for yourself. Your individual first aid kit should contain 1 triangular bandage with a safety pin attached, 1 medium number 14 wound dressing, 1 heavyweight elasticized roller bandage, 7.5 or 10 centimetres wide, with a safety pin attached, some assorted adhesive dressing strips, 12 Panadol soluble tablets, throat lozenges, lip salve, insect repellent, blister treatment kit, sunscreen, and any personal medication. If you do need to bring along personal medication, it should be clearly labelled, including dosage, possible reactions, and the expiry date. And you should inform your expedition leader about the medication at the start of your expedition. You may also need to provide the expedition leader